The university obviously must be aware of this. What do they tell you? And like you said, primarily it's UTRGV. What measures are they putting in place to make things better?
Sure, that's a great question. We actually have a higher education completion and persistence action network, which aims to bring together our higher eds and talk just about those issues, right? So one of the things is making sure that we're providing sufficient wraparound services for our students. We know that there's not one reason that students go to college or stop out or drop out of college, right? There's really, life happens. They need either to support their families or they have their own families. We've seen a lot more students going the non-traditional route where they go into the workforce and then come back into a higher ed program. So we know they need support. We know they need more than just,
Hello, viewers. My name's Steve Taylor, Editor-in-Chief of the Rio Grande Guardian, and I'm very pleased to be doing this podcast because today my special guest is Rebeca Lopez, Director of RGV Focus. Welcome, Rebeca.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
Very pleased to have you. And the reason we're here, was important for me. I wanted to learn more about RGV Focus's annual scorecard for 2023. It's just come out. So we're going to deep dive into that to find out what the scores are, how well our students are doing in the Rio Grande Valley. But before we do that, Rebeca, let's tell the viewers a little bit about yourself. How, through your career, did you get to this point of being director of RGV Focus? And then we can talk about the group itself.
Sure. That's a long and complicated story, but I'll give you the short of it. I'm originally from Harlingen, born and raised. I went to Harlingen High School South, graduated 2001, went off to college, went to Yale University for undergrad, came back in 2005 and worked as a college advisor in Rio Hondo High School, and then pursued a graduate degree and left to San Antonio. And I stayed there by accident for 15 years. I intended to come back immediately following my degree, completing my degree, but I stayed there. I started working for a nonprofit organization, San Antonio Education Partnership, that really focused on college access and success for students. And I loved it. I stayed there for 15 years. Like I said, I started off as a part-time program coordinator while I was working through grad school, and then went to full-time, went from coordinator to program manager to program director. And when I left, I was the chief program officer for the partnership. I learned a lot, and part of that work was a small aspect of it was collective impact. And so pandemic changed a lot for a lot of people, and I was not excluded from that. I moved home during the pandemic primarily because I got married. And I had a baby in 21 and another one last year. And in 22, because I was still working sort of hybrid in San Antonio, I decided to look for opportunities. And this opportunity with Educate Texas and RGV Focus came on my radar. I was actually recommended it by another colleague. And so I pursued the opportunity, and having done a little bit of collective impact in my previous role, it was a great fit. And then just having the opportunity to make an impact the way that RGV Focus aims to, I couldn't pass it up. And so it's been a long road, but I think I'm right where I'm supposed to be.
But it's interesting you say that you left, you didn't plan to be away for so long, but that's the story of the Valley. Increasingly, it seems, everyone talks about the brain drain, and no doubt at best and brightest, many of them do leave the Valley, but we're finding people are coming back. They're coming back because this is a great place to be.
It's a great place to be, and my family's here, but it's also a great place to raise children, I think. I mean, there's nothing that compares to having family around when you're young, and I have the support of my parents, my husband's parents. It's just a wonderful thing, and I look back on my childhood very fondly, and I look forward to raising my kids here.
Well, thank you for telling us a little bit more about yourself. It's great for us to learn that. Let's talk then about RGV Focus. What is the group? When did it start? Who formed it? What the mission statement is, etc.
Sure. So RGV Focus is a collective impact initiative that started in 2012, and it was really a collaboration between Educate Texas, which is sort of our founder initiative, parent initiative, and then the Communities Foundation of Texas, which is a foundation that's based in Dallas. And Educate Texas is the educational arm of that foundation. We do a lot of work statewide that's looking at being, a change agent, trusted change agent in the education space. Educate Texas is most known, I think, in this region, especially as the technical assistance provider for all of our early colleges and PTECs in the region and across the state. And so we have that contract with TEA that allows for us to have leadership coaches at those campuses that help to help the campuses to adhere to the model with fidelity.
It's funny you should say that's what your main focus is, because for those of us in the media, we just think of your scorecard every year, which we'll get to in a moment. But tell us, what sort of buy-in have you had from the school districts and maybe industry as well, which is important to you, I know. Do all the school districts participate?
In some form or fashion, yes. So collective impact really means that we work across sectors to improve educational outcomes. I mean, that's the goal that we have as RGV Focus. Collective impact could mean a number of things in other sectors with other goals, but that's what we do. So our primary focus for RGV Focus is that we're looking to increase the number of degrees, credentials, and certificates in the region. And that's part of an Educate Texas strategic plan goal that we have for 2025 to add 85,000 new degrees, credentials, certificates by 2025. We also are looking to add 100,000 diverse teachers to the state of Texas by 2030. And really that's, due to the lack of educators in the system. So we know that we have a significant gap. And we want to make sure that in this region, we continue supporting our educators, our teachers, to make sure that they stay in the classroom and in the profession.
And on that theme, we lost a lot of teachers after COVID, correct?
Mm-hmm. We certainly did. And part of that is, what we're trying to address. But it's also teacher efficacy, right? So it's not just having bodies in the classrooms. It's really how do we get effective teachers, in the classroom? How do we keep them there? How do we ensure that our students are seeing not just performance, but also growth in the classroom? And a lot of that we are doing through a partnership that we have with the Texas Impact Network, mobilizing HB3 and the teacher incentive allotment. We've got a lot of work across lots of different streams, but I would say it starts with our leadership team. We've got a fantastic leadership team. Again, it's cross-sector. With the higher ed institutions, our K-12 systems, community-based organizations, workforce development boards, and, they just really come together to help inform our strategy and how we're looking at things. They help us to, figure out what resources we need to move our work forward. And then we also have some action networks. We have a professional learning community, and, we're working in partnership with other of our partners to make sure that they also meet their metrics and are able to move their work forward where it aligns with what we are looking to do as well.
And how important is buy-in from the business community, the private sector? Is industry as a general rule interested in your work, and do you get the support that you're looking for there?
I think we're getting there. We have a vested interest in moving work-based learning, both as part of, the PTEC model, because that's, what Educate Texas is working on at the statewide level, as well as in our dealings with CTE. And then just in general, we feel like work-based learning is really a tool that is useful for students across the board, whether they're in K-12 or they're in higher ed. To really get their hands-on, experiences and make sure that they know what they're getting into before they enter the workforce, and that they have that experience to lean back on when they do apply for jobs. They are ready to enter the workforce officially, and that they look appealing to employers who would be willing to hire them with that experience. And so I say that we're getting there because I feel like industry, I think, is the last piece, and we need to really wrap up that circle, that continuum, because historically the work that we've done is with higher ed, with K-12, with community organizations and workforce. So we have that buy-in, and we're just missing that last piece of industry. And I believe there are some connections that we've made that get us closer, but we're going to continue to push that and to elevate work-based learning to make sure that we get where we need to be and support our students.
Thank you for that. So let's move on to the scorecard, the annual scorecard for the 2023. You recently released it. You unveiled that report, that scorecard, and tell us about the event you held, who spoke, and what were the messages that were said there, and then perhaps run through the findings of the scorecard. How well are we doing here in the Valley?
All right. Yeah, so it was a fantastic event. We held it on May 15th at the FAR One Center in FAR. We had, of course, Victor Lopez, the CEO. Victor Perez, the CEO of the FAR EDC, introduced us. He gave us a great welcome. The city of FAR lent us the space. Fabulous facility. It just was such a great backdrop to the work that we presented. We also had the superintendent of Hidalgo ISD speak, as well as his director for teaching and leading, Ms. Martha Garza. They talked a little bit about the impact of HB3, specifically the teacher incentive allotment in their district. Again, the teacher incentive allotment, for those who aren't familiar, allows for incentivizing effective teachers. And so Hidalgo gets to award teachers additional compensation above their annual salary with the TIA, and that helps them to retain those effective teachers in their district. So they talked a little bit about that. We also had Mr. Julian Alvarez, the former Commissioner of Labor, who's now with Lone Star National Bank. He gave us a little bit of a summary of work-based learning and what that looks like at Lone Star National Bank, at DHR, and sort of across the region. And then we closed up with Dr. Art Cavazos, who sort of tied it all together and, brought us home with the feelings, the good feelings, and just gave us a charge to make sure that we're, paying it forward and reaching back and bringing other folks along with us as we make progress. So it was really wonderful. I think the highlight for me for the scorecard was a couple of things. So we talked about policy in the scorecard event and how it can positively or negatively affect us. Specifically, in terms of the FAFSA this year, the FAFSA underwent a redesign. So the Department of Ed released the Better FAFSA this year, which had many glitches and had many of our students, experiencing issues, particularly those from mixed status families. So we addressed that, and also on the positive side, House Bill 3, which allowed, again, for TIA districts to draw down funding from the state. So we have 17 districts in the RGV who pulled down $16 million in 2023. So that's fantastic news. And then through HB3 and the CCMR, College Career Military Readiness Outcomes Bonus Funding, we also have districts who are able to draw down funds for getting students CCMR ready as it pertains to HB3. And so in the fall, we will see approximately $28.5 million to our Valley School districts for students who met those metrics. So again, super exciting news. And that's just a piece of the work that we're working towards.
Before you go on to the actual scores, for those that are uninitiated, tell us what FAFSA is.
Sure. The FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. And so legislation passed in 2020 required the Department of Education to do a simplification of the FAFSA. And so that was rolled out with the class of 2024 for students who are starting college in the fall of 24. So just many, many glitches. And our organization leads a college access and enrollment action network, which helped to give resources and tools to our college practitioners who are college access practitioners who are working specifically in that space and supporting students who are applying for FAFSA and TASFA. So it was a very busy year for those folks, and I know they put their hearts on the line, lots of sweat and tears, I'm sure, for them and for the students and families, because it was a wild year for FAFSA.
I know in previous years when we've covered this and reported on that scorecard, some of the headlines over the years have been the Valley is outperforming the rest of the state, and sometimes we get pushback from people living here thinking that can't be right. Surely not the Valley number one, etc.
Mm-hmm.
But that I do recall those years when that's happened. How are we doing this year?
We're doing really great. So I mentioned earlier this work started in 2012. And when the work started, we've been measuring these measures since then, right? And when the work started, we were significantly underperforming the state in many of these measures. And this year, I'm happy to announce that we are again matching or outperforming the state in 9 of our 12 educational indicators, which again is fabulous for this region. But I want to underscore that there's still so much work to do. I mean, we see these numbers, and we've historically held at 9 of 12 for about 3 or 4 years now, which again is great, but I think we want to see progress. We want to see 10, 11, right? We'd love to match or exceed in all 12 of those indicators. And so I will say that where we see a need for improvement is in our early ed. So we're not matching or outperforming the state in Kinder Ready or in STAR third grade reading meets. And then we're also, and historically this has been the case, we're not matching or outperforming the state in public higher education graduation rates for 4-year institutions. And that for this region is our UTRGV system primarily. UTRGV primarily. And that number specifically is based on a 6-year graduation. So students who are enrolled in a 4-year and are graduating within 6 years. So we're at 35% for 2023, and the state's at 45%. So we need to make significant moves there. We're catching up with STAR third grade reading. We're at 47% for 23. The state's at 48%. And we're also catching up for Kinder Ready. We're at 42%, and the state's at 49%. But again, work to do there.
Sorry, that percentage differential there for the graduation within 6 years from a 4-year institution. How big a gap is that?
10 percentage points.
Okay. Well, before we talk a little bit more about that, let's talk a little bit more about the positive news. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to put you on the spot and ask, name those 9 areas without looking at your iPad.
My notes.
Without your notes. What are we doing well at?
Sure. We are doing well at 8th grade STAR math. We're doing well at high school graduation rates. We're doing well at direct-to-college enrollment. We're doing well at FAFSA completion. We're doing well at 2-year graduation rates. We're also doing well at 2-year and 4-year either. We measure what's called either enrolled or employed. So of those graduates that graduated within the time frame we're looking at, those that continue being enrolled, as in they went from a 2-year to a 4-year, or they went from a 4-year to a master's or a professional program, or they went into the workforce. So we are able to measure those numbers. We have a little bit more of a challenge measuring just traditional employment, but those numbers we've tracked over the last 10 or so years. So that's where we're doing well.
So that's where we're doing well. Let's go back.
And also, I'm sorry, one last one. Yeah. AP dual credit completion, and also college ready. Those are the last 2.
And so before I move back to the negative stuff, that college readiness, is that all because of the dual enrollment programs that started down here and are so popular?
I think that has a lot to do with it. I would say that, the Valley has a very robust college readiness culture, in my opinion. I think some of that has to do with, I would like to say, the work that we've done over the last decade. A lot of it has to do with, I think, Gear Up and its presence here in the region for a number of years. And then I think just family support and educator support around, there has to be something beyond high school, whether you're going to college or you're going into the workforce or you're going into the military. There's some path forward beyond. This is like a stepping stone to something more. So I feel like there are a lot of factors that influence that.
Okay. So going back then to the one of the three areas where we don't perform as well as the statewide average, which is the students coming out of university, they're not graduating as quickly as the rest of the state. The university obviously must be aware of this. What do they tell you? And like you said, primarily it's UTRGV. What measures are they putting in place to make things better?
Sure, that's a great question. We actually have a higher education completion and persistence action network, which aims to bring together our higher eds and talk just about those issues, right? So one of the things is making sure that we're providing sufficient wraparound services for our students. We know that there's not one reason that students go to college or stop out or drop out of college, right? There's really, life happens. They need either to support their families or they have their own families. We've seen a lot more students going the non-traditional route where they go into the workforce and then come back into a higher ed program. So we know they need support. We know they need more than just, the tutor on campus per se. So we want to make sure that we identify those supports and make sure that they're accessible to students across different systems, across different institutions. Pardon me. And then we see a need for identification of opportunities for reverse transfer. So when students complete a 2-year degree or work towards a 2-year degree and then move to a 4-year institution, making sure that they're getting their certificate or their associates retroactively once they complete those credits at the 4-year. And then I think one of the things too, and this is, I think, less talked about, but I think is also something that we need to make sure that we equip students with, is understanding pathways. So specifically, my mind goes to stackable credentials. So giving students like smaller, more reasonable, more achievable steps that they can sort of incrementally work towards, instead of giving them, okay, this is the 4-year path, saying, in 18 months you can get this credential, in another 10 months you can get this credential, and giving them opportunities to get stackable credentials that they can use in the workforce so that they can sustain their own families, sustain themselves, while they continue pursuing additional degrees or credentials.
And UTRGV is heavily involved in RGV Focus?
I'm sorry. So Going back to that, the Director for Student Success at UTRGV is the chair of our action network on persistence and completion. So they've done a lot of work around equity, identifying, again, some of those resources on campus. And the goal of the action network is to create sort of a collective forum where we can talk about these needs, talk about what we're doing as a region, not just as individual institutions, to make sure that those barriers are removed for students in a systemic way, in a with a regional lens, so that we have more success across the board.
So for those students that are not, maybe they're struggling, but they're certainly not qualifying, they're not graduating on time in the universities, do our community colleges in some way pick up the slack, and the students leave the university but then go back to like an STC and perhaps get a 2-year certificate, and so gives them a certificate that gets them into a pretty good paying job, for example? Do you see much of that?
I don't know the data around that. I'm sure that it happens. I would say these numbers, again, are based on 6-year graduation rates, which I think for a lot of our students, if they can't attend full-time, 6 years is a challenge, right? So it may be that there are students who are graduating outside of those parameters, outside of the 6 years. I think certainly we still need to provide those other supports and other opportunities for students to succeed. And I certainly think there are potentially some students who sort of, go from university to a 2-year and vice versa. But again, I think our focus is more so on how are we supporting all students in a systemic way so that we achieve success sort of unilaterally, and that not one institution is having, great numbers and another isn't.
So Educate Texas, RGV Focus, they do this work here in the Rio Grande Valley to help the Rio Grande Valley to to improve the overall state of education here in our region. How well received or read is that scorecard beyond the Valley? Does it help shape policy in Austin at the Capitol or with the TEA or the Higher Education Coordinating Board? Do other parts of Texas pay attention to this and offer you any encouragement? And maybe they're surprised that the Valley outperforms the state average in lots of areas. What's the interaction there with groups beyond our region?
Sure. So I would say that internally at Educate Texas, it's shared very broadly, and so folks, I hope on my team across EdTex read it and they understand it, and they use it as a tool for understanding the region. Not only does it have the actual scorecard, but it also has a little bit of the demographics of the region and some of the stories that we want to share about the work that we've done over the last year. So I hope that it's a tool for them to better understand our work and just the Valley more broadly. And then we also share it with some of our partnering organizations. So not just in the region, but across the state. So I am on some different work groups that includes folks from different intermediaries. So folks that are in roles like mine. So I share that there. And we share it with our funders. So we want to make sure that they understand that their work has been put to good use and that we've been, using those funds to move things forward. I think beyond that, I would love to say that there's more readership, but I am not 100% sure. I mean, it's on the website. It's accessible to folks. I share largely and broadly where I can, but I'm one person, and my team is very small.
But you are well established, like you say, last 12 years, like almost immediately you were accepted by the schools and the higher ed community. So
yeah, I mean, and going back to that, we were accepted because, I mean, collective impact really is meant to be like a grassroots initiative. So we were accepted because the people, like the Valley, said this is something that we need so that we can make these changes, so we can reach these goals together in a concerted way, so that we can work in a cohesive manner towards those similar goals that we have established.
And I should have asked this earlier, but are the community groups still involved like they were at the beginning?
I believe so. So we have, great representation from our community-based organizations, and we also work very closely with Lupe and Arise with some of our other grant funding. So I think by and large, we have seen maybe a shift in who comes to the table, but I feel like the same organizations, the same K-12 systems and higher eds are coming to the table. It's just a matter of again, we've got the leadership team and then several action networks, the PLC. And so we don't want to overburden folks coming to meeting after meeting after meeting. And we understand that it takes time from their day. We sometimes say that collective impact is a coalition of the willing, right? It requires you to step outside of your daily work and invest in something that, while it's for the greater good, is still more work, right? So we want to make sure that we provide avenues for folks to participate and don't overburden them with, convening for the sake of, having a meeting. So yes, folks are involved and they're willing. And I think, together we've identified some pretty great priorities that we want to move forward and I think make sense for our region and are achievable and will lead to great outcomes for the students that we aim to serve.
Well, Rebecca, those are all the questions I had. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Are there any projects coming up that are new? Anything that you're doing that hasn't been reported on before? Or are there any other remarks you want to make?
I think one thing I'll say is, RGV Focus has always been at the forefront of this collective vision, but we also want to bring as many folks as we can into the fold, bring them on board. Partnerships are super important to us in the work that we do. And just, like I said, my team is very small. I'm one of three, but each of us also, prioritizes relationships and partnerships. So we, of course, want folks to come on board to support the work that we are doing, but we also want to make sure that we're adding value and supporting others' efforts. So, insofar as it makes sense to collaborate on an initiative or a project or a program where our goals align, I would love to reach out to folks, or for folks to reach out to us and just see what we can do together, because I think there really is power in collaboration.
Well, Rebeca, thank you so much. Rebeca Lopez, Director, RGV Focus, thank you for coming in and having this conversation today. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure the viewers have too.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.